to sound like a
Stormtrooper.
Well, hello and welcome to this requested tutorial about how to sound like a Stormtrooper. So, I have already made the effect and have a pretty good idea of kind of how you can make it sound. There's probably a lot of small differences and small changes you can make to make it probably closer, a little different. It's all to your taste and liking, but this is what I settle on. So if you listen to this is what we're aiming at.
And then I blasted the second one from behind. You fought 2 Jedi at once. I don't believe that. It happened. You should have been there. They're not so tough.
Alright, and those quotes were just something I found on the internet, and I hope it worked. But it kind of sounds like Stormtroopers. I didn't put any, this walkie-talkie end effects after when they talked, but we can do a quickie of that too in the one we're gonna work with, because this was just to show you. We're just gonna use from a very specific movie quote. This is what we're gonna work with when we're doing this effect live here, and so this is the raw file.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
So you might recognize that one from the first movie, or the fourth, depending on how you see things. So just for the ease of everyone, let's say as long as you have Fruity Loops, you will be able to follow this tutorial right through the end, because I have decided that I wanted this effect to be possible using the plugins that comes with the program. So we're only gonna use ImageLine's own plugins that's gonna be shipped with the program, and we basically just gonna use 3 different plugins. We're gonna use Blood Overdrive, we're gonna use EQs, and we're going to use a compressor. And the compressor basically doesn't do that much. It's just there to compress the sound, to make it, to equalize it. We might put a limiter on the master in the end, but maybe some reverb if you wish. But they don't really contribute to the sound. What basically makes the sound is the overdrive. Because a Stormtrooper, What that sound was supposed to sound like was guys talking through a radio, those comm radios, walkie-talkies or whatever you want to call them, comm radios anyways. And they have kind of distorted sound in them. And depending if you want to have more distortion or not, you might change some of the settings that I'm using today. I kind of liked this. There's some distortion there or overdrive, but it's not too much, but it's not too little. You still hear this overdrive distortion effect going on, but it doesn't take over the sound completely, like a badly distorted guitar or something like that. And then it's just EQs. For this purpose, I just put in about 3 EQs. You can do it with 1 if you wish, or 2. This is more of a preference of how I like to work with more EQs, to just change some small of the frequencies. But basically on a radio, you have more of the mid frequencies when you're talking, just because it's easier for you to hear. If you put it through a small speaker, and this is the same with most speakers, they use the upper mid-range most of the time. And this is the same for the basic microphones that you have with a headset and everything. They all use that spectrum, because you can still hear pretty clearly what people are saying. It sounds kind of clear. You might lose some of the treble and you lose a lot of the bass, but you can still understand and hear what people are saying pretty clearly. So we're going to use a lot of the mid-ranges here, and that's what the EQs are for. But for the purpose of making it a bit more interesting and not too much of a radio where you have no bass at all, we're going to put in some of the mid-range and some of the bass, just to have it sound a little bit more flat. And here's the important part about this. Depending on what microphone you're using while recording, I'm using an SMB Shure microphone. And it's one of the more professional kind of microphones. It's not very expensive, but it's still a more mid-range microphone, perhaps we could call it. So it's not a headset microphone. It's the same microphone I'm talking through right now. So it's a pretty good microphone, and if you're comparing this microphone through a headset microphone or some cheap USB microphone, then some of the EQ settings might be a bit different. You have to kind of hear for yourself how you want to make it kind of sound like you want. Because depending on what microphone you're using, the bass tones might not really be more as present as it is in this microphone, or you might not have as much treble, you have too much mid-range or whatever. You have to kind of fiddle around a bit with the EQs to really find the right sound. So it's all different depending on the microphone or the raw file that you're using, but this is a pretty good default setting for you to follow along and find almost kind of what you can do with it. So we're gonna start. I have rambled on too much already. So we're gonna put this at the effects channel 1, and we're gonna begin with the overdrive first, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because when we overdrive the sound, if you wanna overdrive, if you EQ it first and then put overdrive on it, he will only overdrive the EQ'd frequencies that you can that's really present. Here, if we have it on the first layer, then he will overdrive more of the whole spectrum of the frequencies. Even if we EQ it down, it is still more present and more wider in the sound. So I find it to sound better if I had it first and then the EQs. But it's a matter of preferences. You can play around and see if you maybe like it to have it last in the field here. So what we're gonna do, if you just listen to what overdrive does right now without me not fiddling with it at all. So this is how it sounds with just basic overdrive.
The desktop plans are not in the main computer. The desktop plans are...
So you can hear basically it just makes it louder right now. And I mean, there's really not much settings here that has been fiddled with. So it's the basic amp effect basically here. So we're gonna use the preband, just push it all the way to 1. And that makes the sound more like this.
The desktop plans are not in the main computer.
So what the hell are going on? That doesn't sound at all like a Stormtrooper. No, I know. We have more settings to follow here. So we're gonna put the color here. It's more of the color decides kind of what frequencies you should really focus on the overdrive. We still overdrive a lot the complete sound, but he will focus more of the overdrive on certain frequencies. So I'm gonna have him focus a lot on the lighter frequencies. So around 0.8 is a pretty good one, and then we're gonna hear something like this.
The desktop plans are not in the main computer.
Sounds a little bit more like a Stormtrooper. And we have the preamp. We're gonna increase this one to 0.5, so it's kind of a lot. Well, depending. We're not gonna use X100, so it's really not that much. But so about 0.5, and it's gonna sound more like this. Here you can really gonna hear the distortion.
The desktop plans are not in the main computer.
Maybe I should have warned you to turn down your speakers, because this sound really pushes through the stereo. Anyways, we're gonna have some post filter, and this is just bring back, because you heard how the high mid were really exaggerated and probably destroyed your speakers when I played it. So what this does is just put a filter on, and it's basically a low cut filter, so or high cut. I don't even remember which one is which. High cut filter it is. To bring back the higher frequencies. So now it's gonna sound more dull again.
The desktop plans are not in the main computer.
But like I said, we use this one not to have this special have this high frequency kind of effect like they do on the Stormtroopers. That's what we use for the EQs. Here it's simply for the overdrive. So just let this be. This is fine. But I mean, if you wish, you could probably get a pretty good sound, Stormtrooper sound from just the overdrive alone. But I'm gonna use more of the EQs. But you can fiddle around with this. I mean, if I have something like this, I can probably have a pretty good Stormtrooper sound.
The desktop plans are not in the main computer.
But yeah, and we're done with this one. This is how my settings are, how I find the overdrive to be a pretty good level here. And now we're gonna just put some EQs, and I'm gonna show you something that I have seen a lot of people who makes these fan videos, whatever you want to call them, and they have some stormtroopers talking. What they basically does is do something like this, because we're gonna use this preset old telephone, which really focuses on the upper mid here, and have brought down all the other frequencies here. And I mean, so you're gonna really hear how it sounds light away. I'm just gonna play it, but this is basically how most people on YouTube and everywhere are doing to get the Stormtrooper sound, just this alone, and to me that's far from enough, but here's how it sounds.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
I mean, it kinda gets there, but if you put the overdrive here...
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
All of a sudden you get this little distortion effect that's missing from some of these people. When some of the people are doing these kind of easy EQ effects. But so we're gonna use the phone preset here, nothing more. We're gonna add another EQ, and this is where we're gonna fiddle around for real. So I have already played around with this. I know what settings I wanna use here. So what we're gonna do here is focus. We're gonna bring back some of these frequencies that we have pushed down here, and we're gonna bring some of them up to get back some of the bass tones and some of the treble, just to have it a bit more clear. And so we're gonna have one at 114 hertz, and we're gonna increase it. If you look up here, you can see how much decibels that it is increased by. So we're gonna increase it by 8.5 decibels. There, and you could see it like that, like I said. So just look there if you haven't already. So 395 hertz is the next one, and it's also, let's see, at 8.5 there. And so we have a lot more of the bass and low mid coming back. It's not too much. It's just to not be this overly phone sound like. I mean, it doesn't sound really like a phone, that preset. It sounds basically if you talk to someone on the phone, and then you took the phone and you hold the phone, and you have the person still talking, and you're looking at the phone, and you take it off your ear and just look at the phone, and the sound you hear from the speaker when you're about half a meter or whatever it is in feet from your ear, that is more like less the sound that the phone preset sounds like, and that's not really correct. Okay, so this is why we have some of the mids and the bass back, and we're gonna decrease some of the upper mid because it's a bit too much. But just for the ease of this tutorial, I just wanted this to be as is, and then we have two EQs where we just fiddle around with this, and this is why we, instead of changing this a bit and trying to pull it down at certain points, I find it easier to just go in through a second EQ and just fix that kind of little frequency which I disliked, and it's at 1.9 hertz, so it's around here. No, 1.9, 1900, excuse me. And we're gonna decrease it by 4 decibels. There we go. And then we have at 7000, we're gonna reintroduce some of the treble, and we're gonna put it at 8 decibels. Was pretty good. Okay, there we go. So now we have 2 EQs and we have the overdrive. This is how the sound sounds like now.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
And just to remind you guys, this is how it sounded before I put the second EQ on.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
So as you can hear, it becomes more, it's not as focused on that single frequency. You still hear a little bit more. So I find it to be a lot nicer. But as you could depend on your microphone, this microphone is pretty good at picking up bass, and depending on your voice too. If you're a woman or you're a you don't have as dark voice as me, or you have a darker voice than me. I mean, these bass tones may shift a little bit from person to person. You have to take your voice and your microphone into account when you're doing this, and also how close you are to the mic when you recorded this sound. So I mean, you need to really think about those three things: your voice, your microphone, and basically your gear in total, and how close you are to the microphone. Because the bass, the farther you are from the microphone, the less bass you're gonna have in the mic. So depending on those things, these parameters might be a bit different. Maybe you want to put this one all the way, or you don't want to increase it at all. It's just a preference. But this one works for me. This is for me, my voice and my microphone to get the sound that I want. And we're gonna put the last EQ, which is just a little at the treble. We're gonna increase a bit at 8,000 hertz. And it's not that much, about 4 dB, just to give a little bit more clarity and not have it so dull. So this is how it sounds now.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
So yeah, and that's that. And then we're gonna just add a simple compressor. Just have a pretty good level on the vocals. And I'm just gonna put the threshold here at 10. There, and the ratio at about. I usually wanna use 4.3 and 1, but for some reason I can't really put it here. So 4.4 is good enough. And let's see, we put it again around 14. The vocals were kind of low. There we go. And just for the heck of it, since we're doing a quote from the old Star Wars, let's do it vintage style. Not that it makes much difference in this compressor, but yeah. So, okay, this is how it sounds when it's compressed.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
When I'm hearing it, maybe I want to fix it a bit more. Let me just freestyle this a bit. Wait a second.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
Yeah, good enough. I mean, here we now basically have the Stormtrooper sound, because what we're aiming at is basically a radio voice. Radio communicating voice. So walkie-talkie voice, if you want to call it that. And we're just going to put a limiter, and we're going to have it at 0.2, negative 0.2. There we go. And the limiter. And I talked something about the reverb too. Not that reverb. That reverb. And I haven't used this in a while. I don't particularly like this one. Small studio, how does that sound? I just want a little roam echo, not it should just sound like it's the echo from the room, because we actually have some echo from the room when I recorded this. So we're just gonna increase it so it's not some reverb from at certain points, but it's gonna be a little reverb all the way.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
Yeah. So there we have some reverb too.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
And I know that I kinda promised you about having a little radio thing at the end, so let's do that too. Oh, what am I doing? So, there we go. Come on. All right, this might be a bit too loud. Let's have it at 50. Okay.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death...
It kind of don't really work with the sound. It should be a bit...
The Death Star The Death Star... The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star...
Maybe.
The Death Star...
About there we go.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
So there we go. There we have a kind of Stormtrooper sound. And like I said, just fiddle around with the EQs. They basically makes the effect. And the overdrive, I mean, if you want to increase to have even more.
The Death Star plans are not in the main computer. The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
I mean, you can fiddle around with this all you want, but it's basically overdrive, some EQ, just a basic compressor like you basically do every time that you make vocals or anything, and just a little limiter, maybe a reverb at the master if you wish. The limiter I always recommend, just so you know that you won't get past negative 0.2 decibels. It's very important to remember. But and the reverb is just a little extra spice on it all. So the Stormtrooper effect. There you go. Please stay tuned and feel free to make more requests like Omega Wolf King 2 did with this tutorial, and yeah, subscribe and please like the video.